So welcome to this episode of Ken Morgan's Brain Street Brain Radio. So in this episode, I would like to talk about diversity and inclusion. The Academy Awards this year was really great because everything, everywhere, all at once, won major awards. Best actor, best supporting actor, best supporting actress. Best actress, best supporting actor, best supporting actress, and best director, best picture, and so on. And if, as you know, this has been a film very heavily featured with Chinese immigrants culture and featuring Malaysian, Vietnamese actors, actresses, and so this has been really wonderful. And taken with the fact that Parasite won the Best Picture a few years ago. This was a Korean film. The Academy Awards really getting way of diversity, and I think this is great. And we are celebrating world global culture. There was this Indian film RRR, and of course Natu won the Best Original Song Award. So, compared to just a few years ago, we are seeing a way of diversification at Academy Awards, arguably the most important awards in the film industry. This is something quite impressive. Having said that, I think we really need to think hard about what diversity actually is. And I sometimes feel confused. For example, if you look at the ethnic and gender diversities, we are moving forward. But at the same time, for example, in this country, if you see a bunch of middle-aged men, we tend to say, hey, there's only men and there's only ojisan. That's the Japanese word for middle-aged man. And that's fair enough. I think too many middle-aged men have taken too many important positions. So I think there should be more women, younger people, and elder people, people from abroad in positions where social responsibility is assigned. So there's no objection to that. Having said that, I do feel that among middle-aged men there are diversity of people. There are different people. There's such a heterogeneity of people. So you can't just say that there's middle-aged man. I mean, every middle-aged man is different. The same goes for white people. Nowadays, it is fashionable to say that there are only white people in the candidate, and that is regrettable. But at the same time, among the white male people, there are a bunch of different people. Of course, there are some common features, I'm sure, but the individual differences go beyond the ethnic and gender denominations. So if you really want to diversify people, I think we need to take into consideration many different factors, including ethnic and gender diversity, but not limited to that. So I feel that this is the single most important correction to be made in the great story of diversification. We shouldn't just limit diversity to ethnic and gender diversities. Although these are very important issues, I don't think that these are the only issues that we need to consider. So, when it comes to internal diversities, diversities within homogeneous ethnic or gender group or age group, this is very difficult because it is not something easily discernible. When you see people with certain properties, it would appear that these people are homogeneous, or that's the human tendency. So we cannot blame people for that. But it's not really that. It's not really the case that even if you see a bunch of homogeneously looking people, these people are actually homogeneous. There are differences, but the differences are to be appreciated in more sophisticated ways. You can't identify diversity from the way they look, or the ethnic or gender classification that they subscribe to. And this is a really interesting and cognitively loaded area, and one which is not so appreciated, I feel, in societies. I do feel that we are in the business of diversifying people, for sure, but I do feel that that diversification is often done at the expense of going forward without paying much attention to these international diversities, and that is regrettable. I'm coming to the Tokyo station. I need to get a Shinkansen ticket, so probably I'll be recording the rest of this much later. Maybe in Osaka, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to stop here for the moment. So I think one of the key insights about diversity is that, we even within an individual, there are multiple elements of personality, and so that, for example, a wine drinking Japanese is not what the typical Japanese used to be, or a sushi eating American is not what the typical American used to be. So, each of us are exposed to all these wonderful influences from the wider world in the globalizing economy, so that the traditional idea about ethnic identity is not really relevant anymore. So if you go to the United States, for example, and if you meet with geeks or otaku who love Japanese anime and manga, they are probably quite close to its Japanese counterpart. And if you come to Japan and see a person who loves American film, then that person would probably be closer to the American counterparts than traditional typical Japanese. So I think that's a really important element to be considered in today's world. And without that kind of consideration, I think you use track of the inherent diversity of personalities that is very important in today's world. So I'm coming to a station now, so I stop. So I have moved from Osaka to Kyoto, and I'm walking in the hallways of Kyoto station, and there are many people from all over the world, and there's this visual diversity, ethnic diversity, cultural backgrounds. But as I have been arguing, maybe this is sometimes misleading. Linguistic diversity is also very misleading. When you hear multiple languages, it's really great. If you hear English, French, German, Italian, the European languages, Indonesian, the Philippines, Chinese, Korean, the usual suspects, you appreciate the sheer diversity of that, and it's much better than listening to, for example, just Japanese or just English, for sure. But beyond that, superficial diversity would be features that define each person. How each person thinks and how each person values life and how their worldviews are framed. And when you look at that level, maybe somebody speaking in Japanese might be similar to somebody speaking in English or Indonesian, and within a single language group, there might be people with diverse opinions, totally different ideas, and so that's really interesting way to look at it. And I need to actually buy an express ticket, and I'm looking for an express ticket. Oh yes, I found express ticket, and I think we can. I'm waiting for it, and so this. Well, I probably need to stop here for a moment. So I'm now taking the express train to Nara from Kyoto. This is a really classic line, I should say, connecting two ancient cities in Japan, two capitals actually. Nara was the most oldest capital, and then Kyoto came along, and Kyoto was the capital of Japan for 1,200 years. So Tokyo has been the capital only for about 150-60 years, so it's quite new. Anyway, well, here by capital I mean where the emperor resides. Anyway, not sure. Oh, I need to check my ticket. There we go. Oh. Okay. So, diversity. Yes. So I need to check the platform. Platform 1. Oh, I see the train now. So yes, diversity is something that you strive for, but unless you actually I need to buy something, so I stop here. Actually, I bought hot cafe latte at a convenience store for Friday Mart, so I had to stop. Right size, going to be great for my train ride. So yeah, I think striving to have diversity is a great and honorable thing, but at the same time, it's fraught with misunderstanding, and this I think is the general principle about political correctness. Good has law states that a measure becomes not so. A measure is not a good measure anymore when you try to strive to achieve it. When it becomes a target, it's not a good measure anymore. That is good to have law, and probably it's true with diversity too. Now I made my hot coffee latte, so I'm taking it out in Family Mart on the platform 1 for Nara. So if every person has his or her ways of expressing his or herself, and as a result, there's a diversity of people engaged in academic activities and business and so on, then it will be a great thing. But if you try to achieve diversity from the beginning, then it can be problematic because you don't necessarily arrive at optimum state of affairs. And I'm looking for car 2. I'm coming to a part of the train where it's a double-decker, but I don't think I'm going to get on the double-decker train. I don't know, it's 3 minutes before departure. There's a double-decker train again, and this is car 2, so actually this is my train. 13D. I don't expect this. It's a double decker actually. 13D. Anyway, so I'll stop here. So now I'm on the streets of Nara, the ancient capital of Japan, the very ancient capital of Japan, even before Kyoto. So I'm walking on one of the main streets, and there are a bunch of tourists. Well, I'm not a tourist. I came here for a public lecture with Olympic champion table tennis player. So it's really interesting. It's going to be really interesting. Anyway, diversity, yes. Interesting. It's interesting why humans have started to stress the importance of diversity and inclusion nowadays. Of course, it's a politically correct move. We need to let everybody have a space of his or her own. That's just like Virginia Woolf used to say. And in order to do that, we need to respect each other's individuality. But at the same time, we should say that it is something immeasurable. I have been arguing that of course we need to take care of the external diversity, such as gender and ethnicity. But at the same time, there are some internal diversity which are invisible and which are intractable, which cannot be accessed so easily, like the ethnic or gender diversities. And in order to take care of these aspects of existence, I think we really need to dig deeper. And I mentioned Goodhart's rule, and we should not take an external measure too seriously, because otherwise we would be substituting something invaluable for something valuable. And I think it's really important to apply the principle of Aufheben, in which you try to make things mixed and taken to a higher dimension. This is a Hegelian concept, and although I didn't discuss it in my book, The Way of Nagomi, it is an inherently important principle, because when, for example, you have a matcha, which is a powdered green tea, and ice cream, which is what and if you apply the principle of Aufheben to pull up to higher dimensions, then you can make matcha ice cream, which is really great. And this principle can be applied to, there's a loudly speaking tourist, so I'm taking a different route. I wonder why that gentleman is speaking so loudly. I don't know. Anyway, I'm on the other side of the road, so I think he's American. But anyway, so where was I? Yeah, so we can mix different elements of within the diversity space of our existence, and kind of uplift it, lift it up to higher dimensions. And that's how we can hopefully achieve really wonderful status of existence. And I think it's really important to now we've come to a place where there's this wonderful emperor's tomb, Kofun Kaika Tenno-ryo, which is really wonderful, and it's ancient mound, burial mound, and covered with pristine forest. And this dates back to the 5th, 6th century, I think. And this is Nara, so this is the ancient capital. So we have that kind of remains from the past, and it's wonderful, I think. And anyway, where was I? Yeah, about the uplifting of different elements. So you can mix things and make them resonate with each other, and then we probably would be able to apply whatever is necessary to do the make the coexistence of different elements possible, and that's the principle of Nagomi. And when you do that, you actually overcome the superficial differences between elements. So, for example, when you talk about ethnic diversity, you start from the assumption that people are different if you belong to different ethnic groups. But if you if you apply the principle of Aufheben, then you can define a mixed zone of different ethnic group. For example, in Japanese culinary culture, the yoshoku, Western dish, is the Japanization of traditionally Western dishes. So we have really, really wonderful examples of that here. When we say hamburger in Japanese, of course it originally comes from hamburger, the German ground beef pate. Ubiquitous in the world today, like in the McDonald's restaurants, and but it's also a very simple aspect of Japanese cuisine. Some hamburger, is very popular among Japanese kids. So it's almost Japanese. I mean, it's of course its origin is Western. We apply, for example, the sauce, very mild sauce, prepared in a typically Japanese Nagomi way, and the use of chopsticks, for example, hashi, is quite usual to eat Japanese style hamburger, and it's not only Japanese, but it's also Western, and it's a mixture of things. So, we can't really start from the assumption that there are different elements of the world, and you need to strike a balance between them. Because you can actually do a lot of things other than just putting them apart and try to achieve a superficial balance between them. It's not really the optimum choice, I think, when it comes to applying all these wonderful principles of life that we know intuitively. So I just feel that it's not really in the best interest of all of us to just talk about diversity as such. Diversity is great, but it's not something that would be, the final answer to the problems we have. We have different things to take care of, and we are actually probably in the local minimum, if you like, if we just ask for external diversity and inclusion. We should go beyond that, and when we do that, we might actually, from one point of view, be moving away from optimum state of affairs in diversity and inclusion. So, for example, if you would like to strike a balance between Japanese and Western meals, then you would probably start from sticking to the typically Japanese and typically Western dishes. But there's this question of authenticity then. What is authentic? And, actually there's no single good answer. And if you stick to that concept of authenticity, then there's this problem that you might actually be neglecting very important aspect of our existence, is that our existence is a spectrum, and we can't really classify things into clear-cut subdomains. We can't just say that, hey, this is a typically Japanese guy and this is typically American guy. We can't say that because that's a false premise. We actually need to recognize the fact that in every person there's a rainbow of existence. In a Japanese person there's an American element, and in an American person there's a Japanese element nowadays. So if we put that into perspective, then we don't probably need to apply the principle of diversity and inclusion as such rigorously. Because if you force feed diversity, that is probably distracting in terms of the nagomi of diversity. And I think that's one of the ways that we can express what the problem of political correctness is inherently, because, I think sometimes in political correctness, of course, political correctness is really great. And I think we really need to think in terms of all these wonderful equalizing principles. But if we don't take the rainbow of existence into consideration, maybe we would be rather stuck in the local minimum of not so great state of affairs. So I think by the way, I'm in the city of Nara. This is the morning after, so I have been talking about diversity for some time now, over 2 days, and in Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara. There was a rather interesting man on the side road, and I wonder who he was. He was saying something to the passers-by about diversity. Really, nice person. I think that he is saying something to the passers-by. Maybe propagation of some teachings, religious teachings, I don't know. Anyway, diversity. Yeah, so, I have been arguing that diversity is not just about ethnic diversity and gender diversity and, even seemingly homogeneous population, like middle-aged men, bunch of middle-aged men. There are, of course, diversity of personality and so on. So I think these internal diversities, after the most important, I also talked about linguistic diversity. So, you can talk about how wonderful it is to have multiple languages, but each language domain, there would be common themes. So, you can just say that having more than one language, environment is great in itself. Of course, it is great, but it is not a guarantee of diversity in the contents, so to speak. So this morning, it's a really fine morning in Nara, and I will talk about the ecological theory of diversity, which I think is really important because, for example, I've always problem with people who put the gender equality principle on the list of very important things. Like I totally agree with that. For example, my alma mater, the University of Tokyo, has fewer female students. I think the latest figure is something like 20%, and 80% of the students' body is male. Whereas Harvard, I understand the student body is 50% male and 50% female. The same for faculty. The faculty gender makeup of the University of Tokyo is really shameful. I think a majority of the faculty is male professors, and that's a shame. I understand that. But just to focus on the gender equality at the student body and faculty level is not sufficient, because what I'm thinking is this is something subtle and needs to be put forward in a sophisticated way. But if you look at the ecological system, there are many different niches for different species. So that if you look at a tropical rainforest, it's not the case that each of the species occupies the same location, if you like, in the ecological phase space. They have different roles. Some of them involved in photosynthesis, and some of them are involved in predating, and some of them are involved in dissolving the remains of the deceased biological forms, and so each of them are dependent on each other, but they are also conducting totally different things. And I think that actually is very important in human society too. We probably start from homogeneity bias. In society, we actually do a lot of things in so many different ways, and each of that functionality would occupy a particular position in the great ecological system that is human society. And just looking at one aspect of it, like the student body male-female ratio, or faculty level male-female ratio at the university, is not sufficient, although it is certainly great. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have gender equality at that level. What I'm saying is, now probably we can refer back to the Goodhart's rule here. As a result of all-encompassing reform across all social strata, you have a gender equality situation. That would be great. Actually, that would be the greatest achievement, if not the only achievement. But to aim at a certain measure as if it is the only thing that counts is ecologically wrong. That's my intuition. We need to have a diversity of activities, and some of them are out of the context of the normacy of society. There are many people who live out of the strata of social hierarchy, and these people would be independent, quite functioning, irrespective of the organizational status. So if you look for figures like the gender ratio at the management level of large corporations, you are in a danger of marginalizing different aspects of I need to stop here because I am entering the Gatenno-ryo, the Emperor's Tomb Mound. So I paid a visit to and pay my respects to the Emperor Kaiga's burial mound site. I think it is managed by the Imperial Household Agency. It is something that you should definitely visit when you come to Nara. It's next to the Fujita Hotel. It's a really impressive relic from the ancient times, so you should really, observe it for yourself. Anyway, I feel that, like any social reform ideas, this idea about gender equality and so on, probably sometimes, not always, but sometimes suffers from this lack of appreciation of the sheer ecological richness and diversity that we have in human society. Yes, gender equality is great. We should aim for it. And yes, we should really include all diverse people in every aspect of our society. But that shouldn't be confused with the assumption of a really homogeneous model of the makeup of society. That's simply not true. That is not biologically robust. So I think it's always great to look at nature. I think when we talk of diversity and inclusion, we should always look at how nature is functioning. We do not actually see within nature something that is equivalent to, in the for the lack of better words, politically correct version of equality. There's no trace of that in nature. In the great nature, everything is interdependent, and everybody has its own role, but it's not on equal footing. It's never on equal footing. It's an organic whole, and when we talk about organic systems, we are talking about elements functioning at many different levels, and that is the glory of biology. So I think we probably sometimes are led astray from the biological reality of our existence. And I'm not saying that we should be, opposing really wonderful ideas about political correctness and so on. I'm just saying that in our capacity as well-minded, well-intending citizen, we should always take inspiration from the nature. Because nature would be our measure. Always, it's a good measure. Nature is a good measure. There might be actually a correction to Goodhart's rule. Goodhart stated, if you remember, when a measure becomes a target, then it is no longer a good measure. Probably nature is a good measure, even if we make it a target. Rewilding of human society, not in the sense that we should go back to the savage past, but in the sense that we respect each other's different roles in different ways, while paying the most reverential attributes to the individuality of each of us. I think if we could do that, that would be the greatest achievement of human society. So I'm coming back to the rail station, Kintetsu Nara station. So I think I'll be finishing this rather lengthy session on diversity and inclusion. So to sum, diversity and inclusion are very important issues in today's society. However, we shouldn't make it a monoculture of homogeneous values. We should always look at how nature works, how its deeply organic ecological system functions, and we should always observe nature for inspiration. And if we take the nature as a measure and make it a goal, I think it will continue to be a good goal and good measure as inspiration from how we exist and how we live. And I think it would be quite a wonderful thing if we could rewild the human society in a really essential way that would be consistent with the better angels in ourselves today. So that is my Street Brain Radio, recorded in cities Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara. And thank you for listening.